Well, good morning and good day to you. It's a nice, brisk spring morning today. We have some typical spring weather for us out here, nice and chilly in the mornings. Today's footage, we're going to continue with the thrones, and you may want to pause and make yourself a bowl of popcorn. This was footage from right before we were getting ready to leave for Utah, and we woke up and planned the day to just get these done. So there's a lot of footage. I actually was able to charge the cameras during the day, so this 45-ish minute video is going to be a full 8 hours worth of footage. Not necessarily 8 hours worth of work, because there was some time that we didn't get. And I did not record the footage of milling the ash and cherry logs, but we do have the footage of putting them onto the chairs. So by the end of this video, the one of the chairs will be almost done before the camera died, and I'll throw in a photo of the finished products, because there's no other footage, so this will be the end of the footage for these. It was definitely a fun challenge, and something that was pretty cool to build, actually. I really am looking forward to building more log furniture items. And I haven't decided if we'll try to sell them or not. I don't know. I guess that'll depend on how quickly I can get a set built. But it'll also largely depend on how soon I can get a place to build them, because no matter how quickly I get at them, it's pretty awkward to build in a small space like this. So trying to do any kind of a production would be a severe challenge. And if I were doing them out on the patio, so to speak, I'd be pretty limited in how often I can work, just because, more than half the time we have rain. That's one of the reasons we moved to Washington, but it turns out that just because it rains that day doesn't necessarily mean it's cloudy, overcast, and rainy all day. Most of the time, we get a good chunk of the day that's not rainy, and even like right now, the sun's come out and there's not really many clouds in the sky. So today's supposed to be a good day. I'm hoping to get some carpet finished up on those speakers and get them actually completed and done with. We're supposed to get above 50 for the next 3 days, so that'll be good. But as you can see, the chair frame is coming along pretty well, and I'm just using other things to kind of fill in, trying to measure how long the armrests should actually be, so that if you wanted to, you could rest your hand and hold the end of the armrest, or kind of relax and stretch your arm out a little bit and let your hand dangle. That was the one thing I set forth with the real intent to do, was to make sure that these were actually usable and comfortable to sit in. So they're, I don't know, 15 times maybe, I guess, I tried sitting in them as every time I would make something, I would put it in place and get them strapped together and test it out. Kind of like that. Just trying to figure out exactly where that that mortise needs to go. And if I did start doing in some kind of production, I'd be able to kind of figure that out and have it on, like, keep a list of sizes. Then all I have to do is really adjust the tenon depth and size based on the thickness of the logs. But these were really quite functional. We took a lawn chair, some old lawn chair cushions, and put them on the seat, so you weren't sitting on the on the hard ash or hard wood. Although they weren't terribly they were actually fairly comfortable, even with just the plain wood. But then we were able to get some fake fur, to kind of drape over the back and down over the seat cushion, which gave it a pretty awesome feel. I had shared a photo of the thrones with my daughter and her fiance at the time, her now husband, so that they could see the finished product. And I I told her that I had one more surprise to give them a final touch, but I didn't tell her what it was or anything else about it, just that there was a surprise. And apparently after I left that afternoon, she leaned over to her mom and whispered, I hope it's a rabbit fur drape. Well, it wasn't quite rabbit fur. That was something that Emily had actually brought up at one point, that we had some hides that we've got salted and are just waiting until I can get the time to figure out the tanning process. And that was something we actually wanted to do. We've had those hides for a couple years now, and I keep checking them every so often just to make sure they're not spoiling, and the salt does its job. Actually, I have an elk and a deer hide that are salted and waiting as well. A friend gave those to us, so I've got to do something at some point to learn tanning, but there's just too many other things that have taken priority, so we shall see when I get time to do that. But I thought that was just pretty hilarious that was her first thought, was that it was a hide to drape over the chairs. So here I'm trying to figure out an angle for the backrest, and more specifically, like, how to attach those some boards up there at an angle. I ended up finding one of the ash logs that was thick enough that I thought it would work as a support, but it had some curve to it, and tried that out, and it actually worked really well to give just a hint of curve to that backrest. And so I went out and had to find a second one and cut the sections that felt like they were the right curve. And then trying to gauge how big these tendons need to be. Then I have to figure out where the mortise actually needs to go. Take everything apart and put that mortise in. But then at that point, it's they're ready at that point to glue up, and luckily most of this stuff, well, I guess not necessarily luckily, but most of these were all pretty close to a 90-degree for where they needed to be. I tried initially. I had thought about doing a wider front than back, but as I was working on them, that didn't really go together as well, and unintentionally they just ended up being pretty much just 90. I think that might actually be the root cause of why the one chair is a little bit wider than the other. It's because I had started cutting it thinking I was going to do a wider front, and it just didn't work that way. I don't know. I was in a little bit of a rush, admittedly, and was just going from cut to cut to cut, trying to just make sure that they were comfortable. And so here I threw some scrap pieces of wood down, and now I'm trying to decide what to actually do. I ended up deciding that particular armrest needed to not be, like, we used it originally because it had some interesting character. Character's a polite way of saying flaws. The tree had actually gotten damaged somehow at some point, and so it grew with kind of a flat face, and we thought that would be a cool feature for the armrest. But I didn't like how it didn't sit well, and it didn't allow for a deep enough mortise, so we ended up swapping that out. But then once everything was in place, had Emily test it out, and she agreed it was actually pretty comfortable. So now the challenge is we need to smooth everything and sand it all, and I need to double check and test to make sure that the second chair goes together well, and then also most of the pieces on this one are all cut and ready to go, so it's just a matter of some fine-tuning and then getting that curved backrest piece in place, which I can't figure that out until I have everything assembled. And a couple of these, the mortises felt a little tight, so I just pulled out my pocket knife to shave the tenons down just a little bit. And then we'll use a ratchet strap to just lock everything in place while we work. Those were apparently a gift from Emily's mom, which was kind of funny because we didn't know who they were actually from at the time. We just received a box of ratchet straps from Amazon and thought, well, that's a good gift. These are nice, heavy-duty, high-quality straps, good big buckles, and they were just sitting there in the shed, because that's where it happened to be when I opened the box. And then as I was putting them together, I was like, oh, I need a ratchet strap. Hey, look at that. How convenient. So they got used before we even knew who they were from. And when we were in Utah, she was asking, she asked if we liked the gift, and I said, oh yeah, we've already used them several times. So while I'm working on this, Emily is starting on the sanding, which I just love her even more because of this, but she doesn't mind sanding. I don't know that I could say that she likes sanding, but she doesn't mind it, and I hate it. There you can see poor Charlie there at the bottom of the screen. Still recovering from his run-in with a scythe blade. He finally got adjusted to the cone of shame enough that he didn't freak. Like when we first tried putting one on him, just kind of just to see if we'd be able, like, because we don't have anywhere that's really clean, and so his wounds would get dirty. We knew he would be trying to lick wounds, so we haven't had him neutered because we don't have anywhere, to take care of him after the surgery. But this particular surgery was not something we had a choice on. So luckily, the first time we tried putting one on him, he freaked out, so stressed about it, like he spent so much effort and energy trying to remove it that he was actually causing himself harm. So luckily this time he seems to have gotten accustomed to it, and he still runs into stuff. He still struggles with it, but he at least doesn't fight it, which was good, because there were some times where his wounds were bugging him. So he definitely needed to have that to keep them clean and let them heal. So where we're at now, like I said, I didn't get footage of the actual milling, but I've got the ash and cherry all milled into 2-inch thick boards, and I'm just rough cutting them down to size so that I can figure out where the best straightest sections are that I can use, because I want as much live edge as possible, but at the same time I also want a mostly smooth surface for where you're sitting or leaning. I don't have any clue yet how these are actually going to go together, other than, like I said, just trying to figure out where the straightest pieces are. And it turned out that I cut almost exactly what I needed. I milled almost exactly what I ended up needing. We used 3 pieces of cherry on each back and 4 pieces of ash for each seat. And you can see there's quite a difference between the cherry and the ash. Once they're sanded, that difference really kind of goes away. I'm hoping it will stand out a little bit more once we actually get these kiln dried and get some finish on them. Hopefully that'll get the color and the variations between the woods to stand out and pop a little bit more. But if not, so be it. It is what it is. So here I'm working on, I need to remove the bark, and I had started just with my pocket knife, just prying it off, and it was kind of sort of working. But the draw knife was definitely the better and correct tool for this job. Normally I would want to use a it's a little bench that you sit on, and you put your tool in the it's one of those brain fart. So it's a shave horse. That's what I'm trying to think of. So I'd normally want to use a shave horse, and I actually have a shave horse that I have started to build, but I have not finished it quite yet because I don't have anywhere to store it yet. The home that it was intended to live in has been taken over by other tools and things. The plan actually was to build a shave horse and a spring lathe, and I'm not. I really want to build the spring lathe. I just am not entirely sold on if it's worth the the work that'll go into it, but I'm pretty sure it'll be like these thrones. Like, once I get done with it, I'll be like, wow, I can't believe I ever thought I didn't want to build that. um, which brings up an interesting point. There seems to be a lot of oh, poor Charlie down there. he thought that every time a piece of bark would fall in front of him, he had to try and catch it. And then when he did, he would just sit and chew on it. He's gotten used to the cone of shame enough that we don't have to worry about him too much, which is good, because the first time we tried putting one on him, he put so much fuss and effort and energy into trying to get it off that we ended up having to take it off, because he was starting to injure the wound further. This was a little leg wound he'd gotten a couple of years ago. He was running through the field and ran into something. But that one wasn't bad. It wasn't actually that bad. So we were able to let him get away without it. But this time, this was a deep cut. There aren't many times where I justify speeding, but as we were driving on the way to the pet hospital, that was definitely one of them. I was going about, I don't know, 10 over the speed limit for a good portion of the drive, just driving safely but quickly, and he started to show some personality changes. He started to have an altered level of consciousness, and at that point, speed no longer mattered. Safety still mattered, obviously, but speed didn't. So I ended up at one point looking down and was actually going almost 100. And I told Emily, if a cop, gets behind us, we'll just have her call 911 and say, hey, this is who we are. This is the vehicle we're driving. Here's husband's driver's license. Here's the situation. Here's where we're going. And if we'll take care of this as soon as we get there. Because I wasn't about to stop until we actually got there. Luckily, we didn't see any cop. It is what it is. But yeah, that was a scary time, scary drive. It was also a lucky drive. We usually, I think in the little over 4 years that we've actually lived here, in all the times we've driven up to visit friends up in the Renton area, we always experience traffic problems. As soon as we pass basically Rochester, it starts to get heavy traffic, and then there's always a bog down somewhere between exits 100 and 130. Olympia to Tacoma, the freeway just sucks. It just always does. It's usually a car wreck because people are stupid. But this is one of those few, and by few I think I mean this might have been the third time we've ever driven through there and not had traffic problems. This is one of the few times where we didn't, and this is the only time that I've ever tried to actually speed, so that was a scary drive. But back to the footage, it's time to glue things up. So I'm slathering the wood glue on, and I don't actually trust wood glue completely. I have I've never actually had a project stay together sufficiently by glue only, in my opinion. So we'll put the glue on, and we'll use these straps to actually like hold it together. But then once the chair frame is fully assembled, I went through and put in a screw into each joint, like a 4-inch long construction screw. Now, my worry is that as they dry, the screws might end up causing some cracking and splitting, but I don't think that's going to be too big of an issue. And if it were to cause that big of an issue, then theoretically the glue itself wouldn't hold at that point anyway, so it would be a good thing for the screw to be there. But anyway, the straps came in pretty handy. Still took a little bit of percussive persuasion. One of the nice things is that if you're building a log furniture and you have, another set or a piece that you messed up on, you pretty much always have a wood mallet readily available for you. One of the other nice things about them is that if they're not completely exactly the way they need to be, you do have some leeway where you can kind of, bang them and get them into position. And you can never have too many clamps, too many straps. And there we go. There is one chair done. Or one throne, anyway. I guess the throne is just a oversized chair, technically. But you can see here, this is, like I said, I'll put a screw into each joint, just going up through the tenon, and then into the log on the other side of the tenon. That way it just locks everything there. And it's kind of hard to see the time in here since we're, using an artificial light, but you can see through the slats in the siding that there has definitely been a shift in the daylight. This was a fairly long day, but like I said, we intended for, we figured, and I think we made the right call here, but we figured that we were going to stay up here for the weekend, in the hopes that we got the carpet for the speakers the way we needed to. That turned out to be a total bomb. But also to make sure that we got the thrones built. We had toyed with the idea that we could take the logs to Utah with us. If everything else had been done, we might have actually tried that, because all of the tools are portable, so it wouldn't have been that big a deal. But we definitely made the right call in not trying to do this all in Utah, because it would have been far more stressful trying to do this. The only place we would have been able to do it would literally been in the driveway of Emily's parents' house. I guess technically we probably could have gone to we have a friend who's got a decent yard. We could have done it there. We have another friend that has a little bit of a shop area that we might have been able to use. But no matter, regardless of how, it just would have been much more stressful to trying to do this all in Utah. So I'm glad we did that. It was definitely the right call, even though it meant less time being able to spend with friends and family in Utah. But this one, for the most part, goes together just like the other one. Slather a bunch of glue on each tenon, stick them in the mortise, and a lot of the YouTubers that I watch put glue on both sides, and I've never understood that. I understand that I did comment earlier that I don't trust glue by itself, and B, you do want to make sure that there's enough glue that everything is held, or is being held together by the glue. But if you're putting so much glue on it that like half of your glue is just dripping out, then you're clearly putting too much glue. And these definitely had glue squeeze out dripping down the logs, so I don't know that it would have benefited anything by trying to put more glue in the tenons. Sorry, in the mortises. I think it might have been, if there would have been a way to thicken the glue a little bit, that probably would have helped. But that's okay. Alright, so there we lost a little bit because the camera finally died. I think that was the third battery that we went through. So we'll just finish putting a few screws in them, and then it's time to start working on the boards. As I mentioned earlier, I didn't get the footage of milling them, just mostly because I was just in a hurry, and I didn't think about the fact that I forgot the camera until I'd already started milling, and at that point I just wanted to get it done. It didn't take terribly long. I think I started with 2 cherry logs and 5 ash logs, I believe is what I selected. The cherry logs were a lot longer than the ash. They were about 9 or 10 feet each. The ash logs were, I knew they were going to be super heavy still, because they'd only been, we felled those trees last September, actually, when my dad was up here to visit. Whereas the cherries, they had been down for a year and a half, almost 2 years. And the alders, they'd been down for about a year. It was surprising though, the cherries, I had them covered, and they still hadn't dried hardly at all. The alders weren't covered; they were just kind of in a reasonably stacked pile. And they were somewhat dry. Most of the bottom ones were fairly dry, but the ash, they hadn't dried at all. Fortunately, they hadn't started to mold or decompose at all either, which was a good thing. One of the things I got to try and do this summer is get all of those ash logs that we felled and get them milled into like 1.25-inch boards. They will end up being the flooring and siding on like the walls inside of this after we get some insulation. So we need them to, I need to get them milled and get them starting to dry. And then I'll be able to put a, I don't know that I'm going to do actual tongue and groove. I probably will do some kind of shiplap for them. But I will have to get a planer. I gotta remember to get that replaced soon. And I'm probably going to have to do a big, heavier duty one than the little tabletop that I used to have. But here I'm just taking the ash boards and cutting out the straightest sections that I could find, which I was actually able to get fairly straight sections since they were shorter. But I'm also looking at the color of the sap in the heartwoods and taking that into account. But I'll get them kind of rough cut, and then I'm going to use the circular saw to just create a mostly straight edge. I'm not concerned with it being perfectly straight. As you can see through the door, we're rapidly losing our daylight. So I think by this time in the footage, it's about 8:30, 9 o'clock at night. We're just trying to get everything done as much as we can. So instead of taking the time to set up the table saw, I just went ahead and ripped the edges with the circular saw, and it actually worked quite well. I think there was only one that I felt I needed to clean up. I put the two boards next to each other and then ran the saw through in between them to make sure they were a tighter fit. But most of them, just using the pen line, I got a straight enough cut that they fit pretty well. I did have to go back through and put a little bit of a taper on some of them, especially for the second chair. But it worked pretty well for the most part to just run the saw down one side and then flip it over, use the combination square to mark a line, and then trim that off so they're all the same width. And then I could just clean them up. Emily is bringing out some, I guess it's wax paper, that she's going to tape together, but she wants to... We left the final decorative decisions up to her and her slightly more creative artist mind, which is an interesting topic. I was watching a Four Eyes Furniture video where he talked about the fact that he doesn't see things in his mind's eye, and I had never thought about that before. But what he was talking about made sense to me. Like, if I've been at all kinds of trainings and seminars and things where the person speaking is up there and says, "Okay, everybody close your eyes, and I want you to picture this," and I never bother closing my eyes, because I close my eyes and I see a field of black and red. I see what little bit of light coming through my eyelids looks red tinted, and a lot of the times I will see how to describe it, swirling color sparkles, millions of little red, green, and blue dots that essentially are the rods and cones in my eye resetting. Is the closest I can figure. I have never in my life thought about something and seen in my head what that looks like, which is crazy because when I plan something out, more often than not, probably I would say probably 90-95% of the time, what I have planned in my head when I see the final product is exactly what I had planned. Like these thrones, for instance. We had a fun discussion about that on the drive down to Utah, that they turned out very differently from what Emily had envisioned in her head, and what she had seen in her mind's eye. She says they turned out better. They turned out both more elegant, more rustic, and more throne-like than what she had created in her mind's eye. And aside from the fact that I originally wanted 5 boards on the back instead of the 3 that we ended up doing, that's the only thing that looked different from what I had imagined, what I had drawn out on paper and calculated. And for not being able to like see, I don't even know how to describe that. I just always wrote that off internally as they just want you to think about it. But apparently most people, when you say imagine something and see it in your mind, most people apparently actually see an image, and that boggles my mind. But anyway, the challenge. This is where I mentioned earlier, I had to put a little bit of a taper on some of them, especially this slightly skinnier chair was the real culprit here. So I'm just trying to make sure everything fits the way that I want it to, and then I ended up using the grinder to cut some notches for the posts, and then put a straight edge across the front and the back, and then I'll go use the circular saw to trim both ends of that up so that it's straight across the front and the back and looks proper. And then again, have to test it. And again, I sat down and thought, oh yeah, that's quite comfortable. Oh, I don't want to get up. They really are very, very comfortable chairs. I'm pretty happy about that. The Emily here is discovering there's a little bit of a challenge, since the bottom cross brace has a curve and the top cross brace doesn't. She was just trying to explain what she noticed to me, and I didn't quite grasp it, so we'll address that in a minute. But I grabbed the grinder so I could help speed up the process for her of cleaning up and smoothing those out, because the sander, we're using 80 grit. We actually didn't want to do anything finer than 80 grit because we don't want it to look like finished furniture, but we did want it to be finished, smooth at least. But the sander got bogged down pretty bad with the bits of cambium layer that were still there, so I used the grinding disc on her grinder, or the carving disc on her grinder, to clean those up, and then on a couple of them, get rid of a lot of the little nubs from the branches and things. These cherry trees the cherry trees that these logs came from were basically a game of pickup sticks, oversized pickup sticks that we had. There was 2 ash trees that were supporting a total of 9 cherry trees that had been blown over. The cherries out here grow wild, and they grow super tall because they're competing, with the ash and the alder and whatnot. So they get really, really tall, but they don't develop the root base to support the height. And we have such clay content soil that they just don't get a good grasp. And I think I've only seen a few cherry trees that haven't been toppled. But in this instance, there was, like I said, there was 9 of them. There was 5 leaning on one ash tree and 4 leaning on the other, and they were all crisscrossing. We had a guy out with an excavator to do some septic test holes, and he had a minimum of 2 hours pay, and it took him a half an hour to drill the test holes. So I said, hey, since you're here and you've got the excavator, can you go push those over for me? And he was like, sure. So he pushed them over, made a big pile out of them, and then said, okay, have anything else you want me to do with the next hour and 15 minutes? And I was like, nah, you're free to go. So anyway, the challenge that Emily pointed out a minute ago was the curvature. My solution, and I don't know that this is the best solution, but it was the best I could come up with at the time, was to take a strip of wood to create a spacer between the left and right boards, and then use a couple of small screws to attach that spacer board to the backrest board, and then I could drill through the cross brace through the spacer board and into the backrest. And it worked. Like I said, I don't know that it was the best solution, but and that's what I'm trying to decide at the moment. Is I don't really like this as the solution, but it does work, so we ended up deciding to go with it, and that's what I'll do on the other side as well. So now we're just trying to make sure we get the height right and make sure things are centered, which they're pretty much are centered. I did have to just make one quick little adjustment. But for the most part, we got really lucky, and I'd like to say that skill and talent are what allowed us to not have to make a bunch of corrections. But since this is the first time I've ever built log furniture, and first a lot of this was new experience for us, I'd have to say I think we did get lucky in a lot of ways. But here is the end result. They turned out quite amazing. They were a fun conversation starter. They were a fun topic for people, and they were actually a good photo op. We got a lot of photos of people sitting in them, so that was pretty cool. We ended up having some extra flowers from the rest of the decorations that Emily was able to use for the tops there, and we had a really good time. So we'll call that good for today. I think this video is long enough. Thank you as always for watching. God bless you and yours. Stay safe out there.